Good day. I am Peter Biermeyer, Project Manager at Granite Peak Ski Area in Wausau, Wisconsin. Today we are presenting an overview of the PowerPoint presentation provided to the Wausau area general public. This meeting was held on December 7, 2016. About 200 persons attended that meeting, and this review will be a condensed version of the thorough explanations given by Granite Peak's expert panel of ski hill planners, designers, and engineers. After reviewing this presentation, you can monitor Granite Peak expansion updates at www.skigranitepeak.com. Simply go to the pages identified as Master Plan Updates to gather the latest news about the ski hill expansion. So, let's move on to the PowerPoint presentation. So the question is asked, why expand Granite Peak now? In a nutshell, the key reason is to stay relevant in a changing Midwest and national ski community. Also, ample ski terrain is important these days for all levels of skiers. The expansion would provide necessary services that are increasingly in demand, everything from rentals to food and beverage service to children's center to ski schools are in growing demand. And Granite Peak needs to be able to attract enough skiers to afford modern infrastructure on this ski hill. So why the need to add additional ski runs? The expansion will add 155 acres of land to Granite Peak's lease. Of that, approximately 60 acres will be utilized for new ski runs. These new ski runs will relieve existing runs that are crowded, provide easier family-oriented skiing at the hill, and will relieve the problem with the leased area being near capacity at this time for everything from parking to skier services. In simple, the ski area is way too small to survive long-term as a ski area destination. There are many threats in the Midwest to ski destination survival. As this map shows, over 300 ski areas have gone out of business since 1980. This ski area itself had great troubles during the 1990s. Only a handful of ski area destinations remain between the Rockies and the Appalachians. There's a minimum size to survive. It's found in the alpine ski business. And that's really related to these factors. The escalating costs of running a ski hill is tremendous. It costs about $5 million for one lift. And that lift, in most cases, has to be a high-speed lift with a higher capacity than formerly found. There is a great competition from Western ski conglomerates. Example of Vail buying smaller ski areas in Minneapolis and the Chicago area, with the intent of drawing those customers out west to their larger ski destinations, is a major impact on the ability to keep Midwest skiers and their money in the Midwest for skiing. In the future, it's estimated it will take about 200,000 annual visits for a ski destination to survive in the Midwest. Let's take a quick look at the four pure ski areas in the Midwest that compare to Granite Peak. The first two we'll look at are in Michigan, Boyne Mountain and Boyne Highlands. Then we go to Blue Mountain in Ontario, and finally the Seven Springs ski area in Pennsylvania. Matching up to these peers, let's look at acreage, which is shown on the left. Granite Peak currently has about 150 acres of skiable terrain, proposing to go to 223, which would put it at the lower to mid-range of its four peers. As far as the width of the ski area, which represents the skiable acres and the accessible ski terrain for skiers, Granite Peak currently has about 5,243 feet of width, expecting to go up to 7,900, which again would put it at the middle to low end of its peers. Prior to going on, let's take a brief history of Rib Mountain State Park and then get into the expansion itself. Granite Peak ski area at Rib Mountain was started in the early 30s by a group of local citizens that recognized the value of the mountain for skiing. The park was actually formed in the late 20s after land was initially bought, I believe, in early 1920s. Park had a CCC famous ski chalet built in the 1939. Skiing continued on well into the 70s and 90s, but the ski hill had very little capital put into it at that time and really started to deteriorate in the late 1990s, getting to a point where it almost closed. Granite Peak took over in 2000 and has invested about $25 million ever since then, making it, as we mentioned, one of the premier ski destinations in the Midwest. Let's take a closer look at that acreage. You'll note on this map, which has north on the upper side of the sheet, the green area represents the park during the 1930s. The light gray area was the land that was leased out for skiing during the 1930s. At that time, the park had 160 acres leased out for skiing out of 288 total areas of the park. So well over one half of the park, as you can see, was open for skiing. In 1999, jumping ahead, 330 acres of the then 1,220 acres of the park were open to skiing. At that point, the park had expanded a great deal from its early days, and the ski area had also grown a smaller percentage. Looking ahead to 2005, when the recent master plan for Granite Peak and for Rib Mountain were completed, you'll note the green area of the park has been expanded farther to the west to include the gravel pit and other lands on that side. The blue area was shown in the master plan as future expansion area for Rib Mountain State Park. At this point, the park had approximately 400 of its 1,600 acres, or about 25% of its land, leased out for downhill skiing. Move ahead to the year 2016, and you'll see the expansion proposal, which is the darker gray on the map, a larger piece on the left, a smaller piece on the east, which is on the right. The smaller piece is about 14 acres. The larger piece on the left, the proposed main expansion area, is about 141 acres. Again, the total expansion being proposed at 155 acres. So what does this do for the land use at Rib Mountain State Park? Let's just put all these years together for a minute and take a look. In 1937, the park had 280 park acres, of which 160 were for skiing, about 57%. In 1970, the park had 606 acres of park, of which 235, or about 39%, were for skiing. 2016, 1,600 acres of park, this is current, 405 acres for skiing, 25% currently is the land used for leased for skiing. 2018, with the expansion, the park would have about 1,600 acres unless it purchases more within that proposed expansion area, and it would have about 560 acres for skiing, or 35%, still below the early averages of the park from the early 30s up until the late 1990s. Let's talk about some environmental issues. This has been a huge subject matter amongst many people who look at any sort of activity in a state park. And we want to address that just for a minute. First, a look at state parks in total. Wisconsin State Parks has about 165,000 acres of lands. Of that 165,000, the vast majority are rustic and non-disturbed. Somewhere in the neighborhood of an average of 10% of state parks are actually disturbed with roads, trails, structures, camping, etc. Also in the state park system, less than 1,000 acres are leased out. It is not a huge proportion of state lands, and all those lands that are leased out for recreational activities, running parallel with the mission of state parks to offer recreation. Moving along on the environmental, we're showing a map here that has within it a purple line indicating the state natural area at Rib Mountain. That is sort of a odd shaped line. I'm hoping you can see it. We'll add to you that state natural at Rib Mountain State Park is one of the oldest in the system. And when you ask what is the system of state natural areas, there are currently 681 state natural areas in Wisconsin, comprising over 380,000 acres of land, which, as I've just shown, is more than double the acreage that are available in state parks. State natural areas are dedicated to preserving the species and flora and fauna within their boundaries, and generally are not dedicated to a lot of development other than trails and some light recreational access. Should be noted that the state natural area Rib Mountain does not include the quarry, which is shown in the upper left of your map, and that's something that might be considered for future expansion. The expansion at Granite Peak would dip into the state natural area and use approximately 5.6 acres of that land for recreational use. It would not, the expansion for the skiing would not go near the quarry area. Let's look at that. Shown here are two different views of how the proposed expansion at Granite Peak would affect the state natural area. Now, I have to tell you that this map's been flipped over. We now have north on the bottom of the map and south at the top of your map. So we're really looking at it as a skier might look at a ski hill. The top map in this drawing shows the initial proposal in 2013. Maybe hard for you to see, but the light blue area are new ski runs. And at that point, they affected some of the trails on the top of Rib Mountain. The red trails, the quarry trail, and some of the other trails up there that have been established and used long term. The bottom map represents the current proposal, and the skiing has been pushed down farther in the mountain and also uses much less of the state natural area, as I mentioned, about 5.6 acres. There's no interference with existing hiking trails on top of the hill. In fact, the ski lift that you see is conveniently notched into a portion of the hill and cannot be seen from the hiking trails around it during any season. When we talk about recreational trails, this has been a very big discussion item and is always a huge discussion item in state parks. And I want to talk about the impacts and non-impacts of the ski expansion at Granite Peak. If you look at this map, we have three different color trails shown. The red trails are the unaffected existing trails at Rib Mountain State Park. Those are trails that are there now. Many of them have been built by park staff. Some were built by CCC folks in the 1930s. Others were built by local Friends members who were dedicated to getting additional access into the park. These red trails, as colored on the map, would not be impacted at all during the expansion of Granite Peak ski area. The second color I want to point out is the yellow. The yellow, as you can see, traverses the downhill ski area that would be the expanded skiing for Granite Peak. Those yellow trails represent trails that would be closed during the winter months, approximately 3.5 months. They would be open in the spring, summer, and fall during the popular hiking times. The blue trails on the map are new trails that Granite Peak is offering to build outside of its leased area, but within Rib Mountain State Park. Maybe hard to see, but there's a blue asterisk on the north end, the north end of the blue trails. And that blue asterisk represents a trailhead that Granite Peak would build, a non-fee trail from Granite Peak's viewpoint, a parking lot and bathrooms, which would allow people to access those blue trails during the winter months, and of course access the yellow trails and red trails during the summer months. This is a win-win from the viewpoint of recreational providers in that new trails are being built, other trails are being utilized by multiple users, which is always an advantage when there's a limited landscape, and the park would have a better trailhead for use of hikers and snowshoers. One thing to point out here is that even though these yellow trails are closed during the winter months, Marathon County has just under 60,000 acres of land available for snowshoeing. 60,000 acres. In that area of Marathon County, in all of Marathon County, there's only about 400 acres available for alpine skiing. So in this area, snowshoers, the hundreds, perhaps 1,000, they use it, might be displaced, but they would be displaced by 100,000 alpine skiers. The displacement, again, would only be during the winter months, and there is plenty of other opportunity in the county to snowshoe. Now let's look at this interesting drawing to give you an idea of how trails that are at the park now, in this case the Turkey Vulture Trail, are impacted by skiing. The trails themselves would not be altered. As you can see in the top part of the map, during the off-season, the Turkey Vulture Trail, this is a profile of course, shows the Turkey Vulture Trail, which is notched into the hill and was originally used as an old mining road, would continue to exist. And that's what it would look like during the off-season. During the winter, Granite Peak would simply add a great deal of snow on top of it. It doesn't need to alter the terrain below it or move or substantially alter anything. So the Turkey Vulture Trail would exist and skiing would occur over the top of it. So let's move on. Let's move on to Granite Peak expansion plans. This map shows, again, with the north at the bottom of the map and south to the top. This map shows the current ski plan at Granite Peak. The white runs are runs that are open currently. At the bottom center of the map, you'll see the parking lot and ski area services, all of which come off of Snowbird Lane. Currently, there are, as I mentioned, approximately 150 acres of skiable terrain in this plan, and the total leased area shown is about 405 acres. The new plan, which is represented by purple on this map, the majority of which is on the right side of your map, some on the left side of your map, constitutes the new proposed expansion. On the upper left, the purple runs are high intermediate to expert runs, which would be added on to the existing lifts and existing ski runs in that area. It's approximately 14 acres over there being added to the plan. On the right side is the majority of the new trails, approximately 60 acres of skiing, which would be, because of the terrain and the design of the ski trails, would be primarily geared toward intermediate and beginner skiers. And as we mentioned earlier, Granite Peak needs additional land for those skiers. At the bottom of the map, you will see a new ski service area, which includes parking, ski service buildings, and the trailhead that I mentioned previously. Talking more about the existing availability of ski terrain for beginners and novice skiers. This map is the existing ski runs. Again, we see in the green the beginning ski runs available, which is a very small portion of the existing ski terrain, and then some novice ski trails, which are light intermediate skiing for basically beginner skiers at Granite Peak. Families are telling Granite Peak that they need additional lands for their family so that they can make a ski trip to Granite Peak a very worthwhile experience. So let's look at that. This map shows again the expansion. It shows some changes on the existing terrain, which would be adding to primarily both the beginning skiing and the novice skiing. But more importantly, on the right side, you see the larger expansion of novice and intermediate skiing added. This creates a very significant balance. It brings Granite Peak within a ratio of beginner, novice, intermediate, and expert skiing in line with national design standards for alpine skiing. Simply put, Granite Peak needs additional ski space for families. On the right side, you will notice a ski lift going from the new ski area at the bottom of the hill up to the top. Also, you'll notice two small beginner runs for beginner skiers right off the parking lot area. This part of the ski hill would be reached down Grouse Lane, which, like Snowbird, is right off of County NN. Let's look at that new service area. First, we're going to look at the east service area, which is the current service area for Granite Peak. You see there the base facilities, the day skier parking. Some alterations in this area would be made to help the beginner skiers and the novice skiers. There'd be relocation of some of the runs around the bottom of the hill for beginner skiers and children. Be an expansion of the children's center. The ski parking lot would actually be reduced somewhat, as would the on-road parking in this area. Reducing the congestion here will help the skiers get in and out of the parking area, as well as just relieve congestion completely. If we go to the western side, which represents the new expanded area, you begin to see a picture of some of the additional services that would be added in this area. Additional parking to relieve some of the pressure on the eastern existing area, new buildings for ski rentals, ski services, and skier amenities that skiers are demanding. Also on this map, it shows the trailhead and overflow parking and a maintenance facility added. In addition to the expansion of the ski hill, would be a proposal to add lodging for ski in, ski out at Granite Peak. Please note that this land is not owned by Wisconsin DNR, and it is owned by Granite Peak. And this land has been owned by them since they took over Granite Peak in the year 2000 with the intention of always putting in some form of ski in, ski out lodging. This drawing represents a conceptual view of how a resort-like atmosphere would be created to service families who really like the opportunity of being able to ski in and ski out. Stormwater runoff. Expert panel that evening talked about the stormwater runoff at Granite Peak and described it as a somewhat of a complicated hydrological situation at Granite Peak due to the fact that the mountain has a vast array of springs and seeps that provide water all year round out of Rib Mountain. The hydrologists have been able to map the different sub-basins where water runs off the hill and are working, as they represented to the those in the audience to create the facilitated areas where water can be contained and controlled for runoff. Meetings with local neighbors have started prior to this meeting and are ongoing in the discussions to control runoff. Basically, water on the right side of your map will be running to ditches that have existed for years and flow into the Little Rib River where the water is drawn out for snowmaking. Waters on the left side of your map are generally contained in a pond and then are slowly released into a large stormwater sewer, which releases that water directly into Lake Wausau. This is a view of the current undergrowth at Rib Mountain where there is not skiing, obviously. This area has, mentioned earlier, very little undergrowth. The water flows pretty clearly over this land. It's impeded somewhat by the rock there, very little by the trees, and really flows pretty quickly. What's interesting, when you put ski runs on a mountain, such as Granite Peak, you end up with this situation, which is an actual picture at Granite Peak. Once you remove trees, it allows for shrubs and major grasses to grow. These grasses and shrubs not only slow down water, but help to contain the flow so that it doesn't cause soil erosion, which is common in many areas at Rib Mountain where there's only tree growth. As I mentioned, water on the eastern side goes into a large pond, which Granite Peak is at this point looking to fortify and strengthen to make it a more solid pond retention area and usable area for future snowmaking. Let's talk snowmaking. Granite Peak uses water from the Little Rib River to make snow at Rib Mountain. Currently, the 2017 snowmaking trends in the Midwest indicate that the weather is more extreme. Snowmaking is critical to the success of any ski endeavor. And ski hills need to make much snow faster and during more marginal conditions. Granite Peak is no exception to this. At Granite Peak, the existing system is efficient, but they will be using new technology to improve marginal performance, to make more frozen droplets and have less curing time. Their snow heads will be elevated and directed more to the areas that need snow. More detailed view on that, they'll be moving to a bigger, more powerful system, an improved energy efficient system. Take less time, it'll be more selective, it'll make more snow with less water. Ultimately, it's the goal of Granite Peak to be able to get snow on the mountain quickly when it needs it during the late fall for skiing and have their snowmaking done very quickly and not have to do any more snowmaking during the rest of the snow season. We talk for a minute about an important feature, night lighting at Granite Peak. Granite Peak has been lit for years for skiing, and it's a popular attribute for many people, season ticket holders as well as travelers, to ski at Granite Peak. But here's what's going on. Granite Peak's dedicated itself to replacing its metal halide units with an encapsulated solid amalgam unit. That's a mouthful, but what that means is that they will be replacing a 1,000-watt bulb with a 300-watt bulb. But more importantly, this light is diffused and it complies with dark sky guidelines. There would be 500 fixtures placed at Granite Peak, and the bulbs will last for about 25 years compared to the current 3 to 5 years. If you look at this picture, you'll see an example of this new efficient night lighting. This is a very different view of Granite Peak has right now for its night lighting. In this picture that we're showing, the light is directed down onto the ski areas where people ski. It's not diffused into the atmosphere or lost otherwise. More importantly, the light is absorbed by the snow. It's not reflected off, causing glare or light into the night. It's a very, very effective way of lighting ski hills in areas where you have neighbors and others. Infrastructure improvements. You talk for a brief moment about some of the things that will be occurring to provide services to Granite Peak. We had a presentation at the meeting by a local engineer who has done a significant amount of work on looking at sewer and water connections for Granite Peak in its expansion on the west side to include its 25 acres of lodging. There are several different ways. This map shows that sewer and water could be put in to reach the expansion area. There are some shorter routes represented by the red line and the darker green line. There's also a lighter green line around the outside of the map that shows another sewer and water proposal that would use parts of County NN. We can say this: Granite Peak's officials are working very closely with Marathon County, the town of Rib Mountain, and the Rib Mountain Sanitary District to come up with the best plan, not just for Granite Peak, but also for the neighboring community of Rib Mountain. There's lots to discuss here. Additional discussions will be held, I'm sure, with neighbors in the future as this plan moves forward. From a traffic standpoint, County NN is the major feeder, which is shown where the two little black arrows are on the upper right part of your map. That's Snowbird Lane. At that point, some form of traffic control may have to occur, or a widening of the pavement to allow traffic to go around. It currently has a significant amount of traffic, and some additional work is recognized might be needed to be done there. At Grouse Lane, which is on the left side of your map, Grouse Lane serving off of County NN, the new western expansion area, may need some similar traffic control. The goal here is to allow traffic to get in and out of Granite Peak during its peak periods onto a major county arterial in a way that's safe and efficient. That concludes our presentation of the PowerPoint review for the public meeting given at Granite Peak in December 2016. Again, I invite you to go to the website www.skigranitepeak.com for further information. Thank you for listening.